you do need to be very extraordinarily cautious around when entering into an unregulated space or less regulated space like beauty care.
Welcome to the Learn Skin podcast with me, Dr. Raja.
And me, Dr. Hadar, where we discuss all things skin.
Join us as we delve into the art and science of skin health in today's episode.
Hey, Raja, can you say the thing I told you to tell them?
Of course. We are board-certified dermatologists. This podcast is meant for educational and informational purposes only and is not considered medical advice, nor does it serve as a substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. All opinions shared do not express the views of Learn Health, Inc. Let's get to the good stuff.
Hey, Raja, how are you today?
Hey, Hadar. I'm looking forward to another really good conversation. Today I was thinking more about ingredients. And I know that food is your favorite, but we're talking about topical foods, topical ingredients.
Ooh, yes. Even better, because that combines two passions of mine, obviously ingredients in food, but also ingredients in what we use for our patients. And, patients come in all the time and they ask me questions about, how about this product and that product? And, there's a lot of education to be done. There's so many ingredients there. We really need help to navigate that, to help us help our patients navigate through this jungle of ingredients and understanding what's pre-drug and a prodrug and what goes in and what's actually active and how to put all this together into a regimen that makes sense, right? It's such a mess. We need help, man. We really do.
This area is one of my first loves because when I went to Berkeley for my engineering degree, when I was in my master's program, we actually looked at topical drug delivery. So this is an area that's near and dear to my heart. And boy, do we have an expert talking to us. With us today, we have Dan Winn. He is a PhD in chemical engineering, which he did in the University of Massachusetts Amherst. And he's got multiple patents. And he's also the founder of Actera Ingredients. So he really is a co-inventor and I would say an innovative engineer, another Renaissance man for the podcast. So Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me, gentlemen.
Give us a little bit of an insight, maybe like a sneak peek into your mind. What got you, before we get into all the nitty-gritty about ingredients and topicals and how they work, how did you get interested in this space and why skin ingredients?
Oh, it's always been an interest of mine. In fact, like a lot of teenagers, I was an acne sufferer myself and enjoyed the discovery of skincare and how it could help me. And then in my professional career, through some, as things happen, some good accidents, I ended up in this field and went, full bore into it. I really took to it very quickly once I was in it.
And maybe you can help some of us listening. We have a lot of clinicians, but also patients in general that are thinking, why is it so important to know the whole ingredient story in a product, right? Shouldn't we just be thinking about the active ingredient and that's it? Why is there such importance to everything else that goes into a product?
Well, I'm very lucky because I get to work with a lot of cosmetic chemists, people who formulate products. My company, half the people are cosmetic chemists. And so, they take it very seriously, the aesthetics, consumer experience, how it feels, how it smells, the after feel, the initial feel. There's so many parameters that go into the experience of putting on skincare products. And that comes from the whole ingredient deck, or the IL, the ingredient list, as we say, not just the active ingredients. And as we were talking earlier before the show, I think one of the big difference in skincare and the new burgeoning clinical skincare, which are highly active cosmetics that are non-prescription, is that it really is driven not just by the active ingredient, but by the experience of the consumer, how much they enjoy using these products. And so it's really crucial to use the whole ingredient deck. And what's interesting to me as a chemical engineer and as someone who, like you, Hadar, I enjoy food and food ingredients, is we source ingredients from all over, from the food industry, from agriculture, from the chemical industry, and from pharma in one way or another. And so we explore all those spaces to try to put together a really appealing and effective product.
Thanks for that overview there. I kind of want to jump into maybe some of the little bit more detailed conversation here. So I know we were talking about ingredients, and maybe you can break down to us this concept of pre-drugs, prodrugs, because we've seen this in the space before. And I think one of the areas that we see this a lot, which a lot of people may actually take for granted, may not realize this is a thing, is this concept with vitamin C, where we have tetrahexyldecyl ascorbate, it's a mouthful, right? THDA, where we know that that was a formulation made to help vitamin C get into the skin better, but then it breaks down and then you have the vitamin C released. So can you give us a insight into how pre-drugs work or pro-drugs, and what's the concept behind them? Why use them?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of active ingredients, whether they're drugs or vitamins or similar, ones that are going to have activity in the skin are not necessarily stable. And that well. And that affects the consumer experience and the effectiveness, right? If something turns brown, oxidizes, no one likes a rancid smelling product. So vitamin C, the chemical itself is, the vitamin is obviously crucial for metabolism and works in the skin. But the pure vitamin C, ascorbic acid, oxidizes very quickly, turns a consumer product brown, orange, brown, very unappealing. So there's been so many attempts to make more stable forms of vitamin C. The molecule you talked about, tetrahexadecyl ascorbate, is an oil soluble version of vitamin C. So it can go in the oil phase in emollients, botanical oils or esters, silicones. It can go in that phase. And the oil phase doesn't have a lot of oxygen and is resistant to oxygen. And so it helps that vitamin C material last a lot longer by being attached to fatty chains. And then when it goes on your skin, we're very lucky with the skin because the skin is active with enzymes. And one of the most prevalent enzymes are these lipases. They're very similar to the enzymes that they put purposefully in laundry detergent to degrade the dirts and oils and fats in your clothing, but we have them naturally on the skin, and that can release the fats from that vitamin C and release pure, stable vitamin C in your skin. So there's been lots of versions of vitamin C. There's 3-O-ethyl ascorbate. I think you folks might have seen that in some skincare products. Also ascorbyl glucoside. And these are all more stable than the original form of vitamin C. And they're precursors. In medicinal chemistry, the term used is prodrug, something that gets converted by enzymes in the body, on the body, into the active form. The word prodrug we use sometimes, but it's controversial because of the FDA definition of drug versus cosmetic. So like you said, Raja, a pre-drug or a transformation that happens to a molecule to make it active is one way we talk about it.
And how easy it is to predict how the prodrug is going to behave, right? Because a lot of times what happens, the lipase or whatever enzyme cleaves this piece of the protein and now it becomes the active molecule. But then there's maybe more than one active ingredient. How easy it is to predict, especially when we talk about maybe natural products that are coming into the fore and products that are applied in aesthetics, especially?
That's a great question. So many things are hard to predict in skincare. We've got some great new tools. There's a tool that's come on the scene over the last 20 years called in vivo Raman spectroscopy. It's a kind of, quantitative device probe, and we can look at how the active ingredient travels through the skin from the very top layer, towards the more active skin cells deeper in the dermis, epidermis, and so on. So we'll use testing like in vivo Raman spectroscopy and of course clinical testing to see if something is really working. Very hard to predict though, but what's been proven over the last few years is these lipophilic versions where you're attaching a fatty chain with an ester group seem to be universally effective because the skin likes to convert them to the active form. So this is somewhat predictable that ester prodrugs can be useful. And we see that with kojic acid. There's a material called kojic dipalmitate. And again, when you see these words like dipalmitate, that there's a fatty chain, palmitic acid, in fact, two of them, attached to kojic acid, and this makes it oil soluble, just like the vitamin C example we've talked about. And of course, our company has 2 lipophilic prodrugs as well that are used in cosmetics. And the clinical work in all these areas has shown that the ester prodrugs are generally effective.
What's really interesting in this space, and maybe this is a good kind of segue, is to look at the cosmetic space and just understanding how the landscape is changing for, say, retinols in general. And if you look at the retinoids as a group, I mean, here's another whole, like, we were mentioning, like, there's a lot of transformations and shifts before something becomes active, whether it's retinol, whatever it is. We have generally looked for cosmetic agents that seem to be better tolerated and whatnot. But Hadar, maybe, you can comment on this too, but this is this weird phenomenon with the retinoids where a lot of people think my skin needs to peel because I feel like that's when it's working. It's kind of like, do you guys remember those commercials with the shampoos where they'd put them on their head and be like, I know it's working because it's tingling, kind of a thing.
Right.
And so it's like you're waiting for this tingle on your skin. But I think the newer data is showing whether it's a pre-drug or a pro-drug for the retinoids or whether it's alternatives like, bakuchiol, for example, you don't always have to be scaling and peeling your skin off.
Yeah, Raja, it's really strange, this phenomena of sometimes people needing to feel, right, the action of the medication or the cosmeceutical they're applying, where sometimes it's appropriate, but as you mentioned, in a retinoid, it's not really needed. The effect is being done. But that brings up a great question, actually, Dan, talking about compliance and the issue of compliance in cosmetic product versus a prescription. Talked about this before. Maybe you can elaborate on that, because I think it's a fascinating concept, especially for providers as they interact with their patients, and especially in the dermatology space, where sometimes we, in the same session, can give a prescription and maybe a product that's more for skincare.
Yeah, well, as you guys know, when a patient gets a prescription, they're going to try to comply based on their physician's directive. But the products they buy in the store, there's so much marketing materials. There's so much beautiful color packaging, dispensers involved, that the patient's really going to, and the consumer's really going to use the product that they enjoy on a daily basis. And so our job is really to combine these stable, active ingredients with great bases, great delivery lists behind them that are delivering that great effect. And you were talking about retinoids, and as you folks know, Actera has gone away from the first generation retinoids, the retinol and the retinoic acid and the retinaldehyde, and we've moved into these third and fourth generation retinoids. And there's a lot of great science there around the different retinoid receptors that these advanced retinoids target. They're more selective in the receptors they target, and that leads to less irritation, less peeling, less inflammation. The retinoid itself is more anti-inflammatory and is more targeting the collagen synthesis directly. And so you're getting, with these advanced retinoids, a lot of the benefit and a lot of the compliance that you were talking about.
So, Dan, actually, on that note, and I think this is a really fascinating space because I think that the paradigm is shifting, that you don't have to irritate all over the place to get an effect. And I think what had happened was we just mistook the side effect to be the effect. And obviously now the later stage retinoids, we know that this is not the case, or even retinoid analogs. So tell us a little bit about the ingredient that you have. What is its structure? And why is it innovative? Because, one thing we love to do on the podcast is to talk about some innovative things that people haven't heard about before. And I'm guessing many of you listening haven't heard about this. So hopefully it's something new and interesting.
Well, thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about adapanoid. It's our derivative of adapalene, widely used in your field in RX. And now, since the last few years, there's been OTC different. And, innovating in cosmetic space can mean a bunch of things. It can mean brand new technology, but it can also mean working around regulatory restrictions, working around formulation challenges. And so in our case with adapanoid, it's got the name oleal adapolinate. So we've attached this fatty group to it, like we talked about before, that the skin converts to the active form. By doing that, we have an oil soluble material. It goes easily into an oil phase. One of the challenges with adapalene, and I don't know what you two think about this, but adapalene is really only soluble in ethanol. So if you look at the OTC products that use adapalene, ethanol is high up there on the ingredient list as a solvent. And as you know, whether it's, social media or true effects, some people are impacted by ethanol, but there's a lot of desire to have alcohol free in people's routines. And so adapanoid allows cosmetic brands, formulators, direct dispense, derm brands to formulate without the restrictions and costs of OTC development, and can go directly to the market, the beauty market, the clinical skincare market, in an alcohol free format. And we've tested it versus retinol, and it's as good or better in some of the endpoints as retinol. And so we have brands already launching with it, and it's quite exciting.
Yeah, and I think the space of prodrugs and predrugs is actually exciting just in general, because I think more than the fact that you have a breakdown to the the drug that, or at least the agent, the ingredient that we want to having an effect, whether it's cosmetic or not, I think the ability to work with the ingredient is also so important. And I think just from a formulation perspective, the vehicle matters so much. I mean, I think Hadar can also agree to this, but if a vehicle doesn't feel good, or it stings, or if on impact it's already drying your skin out, or it's not something that's suitable to apply to that area, people are going to select away from it. And especially when you get into the OTC market, I feel like the way the formulation feels is probably just as important as whether people are going to see an effect from it. So I think these formulation considerations are huge. Did you settle on the side chain based on its ability to solubilize, or how do you design these side chains that are the whatever is going to help become into that pre-drug or prodrug form?
Yeah, we look at that in this case, we looked at exactly that. We wanted it to be soluble in the typical oils that cosmetic chemists, formulators, product developers love to see. So that's why we picked the oleal chain, which is an unsaturated, just like the kind of chain in most vegetable oils. And that's how we selected for that. But I wanted to add another thing. It's not just the vehicle. I mean, everything you said was really crucial, Raja. But there's another issue with some of these active ingredients that sometimes people forget about, because cosmetics is to a large extent self-regulating. But that's a question of toxicity and systemic toxicity. United States market is pretty hands off in that, and we self-regulate, but we look to Europe where they do a lot more rules and regulations with topical actives restricting the levels of vitamin A's, for example, to avoid vitamin A toxicity. And in the case, there's a large desire to use tranexamic acid as a depigmentation agent in skincare, but there's increasing restrictions on the level of tranexamic acid that you can use. So we developed a material called TX Vector that again is an ester prodrug. We're able to get a large effect due to preferred skin penetration at a very low use level. So the innovation comes in a variety of ways, whether it's making a better vehicle or getting better penetration with less of a material that the regulators allow.
Now, can you do this to any topical ingredient? Can you take this approach and create something that can then, be broken apart after it's got great penetration to then release the ingredient? I mean, are there limitations, or is sky's the limit with this approach?
There are, of course, limitations. Some molecules just aren't suitable for attaching things to. In a way, you could probably use AI to scan the whole universe of active compounds and see which ones are suitable for that. What we do is we're kind of just listening to the consumer and listening for the needs. So the two needs we addressed: hyperpigmentation, PIE, PIH, with a tranexamic acid prodrug, and then a less irritating, more effective retinoid with the adapanoid prodrug. Those were just two big demands coming out of the marketplace. But we're looking at other things right now. But there's probably a pretty big space, but you have to look at safety as well. So that limits you. When you're looking at androgenic materials, which obviously have tremendous potential for acne, tremendous potential for hair growth, you do need to be very extraordinarily cautious around when entering into an unregulated space or less regulated space like beauty care.
Yeah, let me ask you, one of the ingredients that's I think really garnered a lot of attention over the last 5 years is hyaluronic acid. And gosh, hyaluronic acid isn't hyaluronic acid isn't hyaluronic acid because there's so many different subvariants of it anyway. Is this suitable for this sort of an approach to deliver like a hyaluronic acid that doesn't normally penetrate well? Can you take this approach to help it penetrate better?
I think that's a great angle to pursue. We haven't done that. I think the hyaluronic acid, as you know, is a polymer. It's a large molecule.
Right, exactly.
And so they've already, the industry, the hyaluronic acid leaders have already produced smaller hydrolyzed segments that are less than 500 microns to help penetrate the skin. But I do think there's work to be done to make it more penetrating. We ourselves has looked at other materials. There's a material called ectoin, which is used in the medical field, mostly in the ophthalmology area. And we've looked at that to see if we can get it to penetrate the skin. So there's lots of different molecules to look at, but that's one that where probably more work should be done.
Well, Dan, gosh, we could talk forever about engineering and skin. This is a dangerous combination, I think, for the two of us, because we'll go on and on. But I want to thank you for just taking us through this journey of ingredients and this whole concept of why you might want to go towards a pre-drug, prodrug kind of an approach. And perhaps the most important thing is why the formulations are really, really important. So with that, maybe you can just let us know, kind of like as we end here, what's your philosophy around ingredient development, and what do you hope you're going to be able to impact change with?
Well, that's a great question. There's so many good ingredients and so many great brands and formulators out there. It's a really high barrier to do something new. Our motto at our company is clean plus active, clean beauty. It can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, but I think safer, gentler, more renewable, a little more green chemistry is what people are looking for. So we're always looking at that natural space and the clean beauty space. But we're seeing that people want to experiment a little bit with active ingredients. So we want to help facilitate that in a safe way. And we think some of these innovations, taking drug-like molecules and making them cosmetic precursors that your own body can kind of gently and slowly convert into the active form, is really one of our key thesis and a business thesis for the whole company.
Well, it's innovative, and really appreciate your time today, Dan, and thanks for spending some time with us on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. And that's a wrap for today's episode. But these conversations are just way too good to end here. Wouldn't you agree, Raja?
Absolutely, Hadar. That's one of the main reasons I get so excited about our conference, the Integrative Dermatology Symposium. Every year, it's a chance for us to continue expanding our minds for what's possible in dermatology for our patients, and also to bring the latest clinical knowledge back to the clinic. And this year's theme has been long awaited. Do you want to spill the beans?
Oh, yes. You don't want to miss this one, folks. This year's theme is Nurturing Skin Resilience, the Science of Aging and Wellness. And it's happening from September 26th to the 29th, 2024.
Yes, and we'll cover topics from conventional medicine to traditional approaches, from inflammaging to exosomes, and from cosmeceuticals to women's health, and more.
The agenda lineup looks amazing. Not only the topics, but also the real-world case discussions, workshops, and networking events. No wonder we've expanded the IDS to 4 days. So much more to learn and do.
Plus, you can't go wrong at a brand new resort that just opened up this year at the Lowe's Arlington Hotel and Convention Center in Arlington, Texas.
Texas, here we come! And for our esthetician colleagues, please join us on Sunday for the Integrative Aesthetics track.
So come check out integrativedermatologysymposium.com for all the details. We hope to see you there.